Katie's first week at the academy was the hardest thing she had ever done. The training started before dawn and didn't end until late at night. Every muscle in her body ached, and her mind felt like it was swimming through thick mud. The obstacle courses were designed for species with different bodies than hers. The Vorthak could climb walls with their forearms. The Zentari could jump 3 times their height with their powerful legs. The crystal beings like Fin 12 could reshape their bodies to fit through tight spaces. Katie had to find her own way through everything. She couldn't climb as fast as the others, but she could hold on longer. She couldn't jump as high, but she could land more quietly. She couldn't change her shape, but she could squeeze through spaces that looked impossible. Pathetic, Rylock said after Katie finished the morning run 5 minutes behind the rest of Squad 7. On Vorthak Prime, children move faster than you. Katie wiped sweat from her face and said nothing. She had learned that arguing with Rylox only made things worse. The weapons training was even more frustrating. The plasma rifles were designed for alien hands and nervous systems. When Katie fired them, the targeting system couldn't read her thoughts properly. Her shots went wide while other cadets hit perfect bullseyes. Perhaps the human should try throwing rocks, suggested Cadet Vex, a snake-like creature with poisonous fangs. That seems more appropriate for her primitive species. The other squad members laughed. Katie felt her face burn with anger, but she kept quiet and tried again. By the 3rd week, something started to change. Katie began to understand how the different gravity affected her movements. On Earth, everything was heavier and harder. Here she could move in ways that felt almost like flying. She started using the lighter gravity to her advantage. During combat training, she would leap over opponents who expected her to dodge sideways. In the obstacle courses, she began treating walls like suggestions rather than barriers. Her scores improved slowly but steadily. She was still behind most of her squad, but the gap was shrinking. Interesting, Commander Zeth Kohler said one day, watching Katie navigate a maze designed for species with multiple eyes. She had closed her eyes and was moving by sound and touch, senses that her Deathworld evolution had made incredibly sharp. Katie didn't hear him. She was focused on the subtle air currents that told her where the walls were, the tiny sounds that revealed hidden passages, and the faint vibrations in the floor that warned her about traps. She finished the maze in record time. Commander Zeth Kohler pulled up Katie's files on his personal computer that night. What he read made him uncomfortable. Earth's atmosphere was toxic to most species. The gravity was crushing. The temperature swings would kill most life forms. The planet was full of predators, diseases, and natural disasters that happened regularly. According to the files, humans had evolved in constant competition with creatures that could kill them easily. They had survived ice ages, asteroid impacts, and supervolcanoes. They were persistence hunters who could chase prey for days without stopping. The commander closed the files and tried to forget what he had read. Katie Morrison seemed small and harmless. The reports had to be exaggerated. The next day brought a live training exercise. Squad 7 was dropped into a simulated war zone and told to capture an enemy position. Real weapons with stun settings, real explosions, and real danger. Rylox led the squad through the urban environment, using standard Vorthak tactics. They moved in formation, following the plan they had practiced dozens of times. Then everything went wrong. The enemy AI was smarter than usual. It had set traps and ambushes that the standard tactics couldn't handle. Within minutes, half the squad was stunned and eliminated from the exercise. Rylox froze. His training had not prepared him for this level of chaos. He stood in the middle of a burning street, unable to decide what to do next. Katie saw 3 enemy drones moving to surround them. Without asking permission, she grabbed Fin 12 and dragged the crystal being into a nearby building. "What are you doing?" Rylox demanded over the comm system. Katie ignored him. She had spotted something the others missed. The building they were in was connected to the enemy position by underground tunnels. The AI had expected them to come from the street, not from below. "Follow me," Katie whispered to the remaining squad members. "Stay quiet and stay low." She led them through the basement, moving by instinct through the darkness. Her human eyes could see better in low light than most species. Her human ears could hear the enemy drones moving overhead. They emerged behind the enemy position just as the AI was preparing to eliminate Rylox. Katie signaled for the others to attack from multiple directions at once. The exercise ended with Squad 7's complete Victory, explain your tactics. Commander Zeth Kohler demanded after the exercise. Katie stood at attention. The enemy expected us to follow standard assault procedures, so I didn't follow them. You abandoned your formation. You ignored your squad leader's orders. My squad leader had frozen under pressure. Someone had to act. The training hall went completely silent. No cadet had ever spoken about a squad leader that way. Commander Zeth Kohler's red eyes began to glow brighter. You dare to question the leadership of a Vorthak warrior? Katie met his gaze without flinching. I questioned the leadership of someone who was about to get his squad killed. That night, Katie couldn't sleep. She walked through the academy's maintenance corridors, areas that most cadets didn't know existed. She had found them during her first week, when the regular areas felt too crowded and hostile. The maintenance tunnels were quiet and dark. They reminded her of the caves near her home on Earth, where she used to go when she needed to think. She didn't know that Commander Zeth Kohler was watching her on the security monitors. He saw how she moved through the darkness without making a sound, how she navigated the complex tunnel system without getting lost, how she seemed perfectly comfortable in places that would terrify most species. For the first time, Commander Zeth Kohler began to wonder if the reports about Earth might be true. The next morning brought news that would change everything. The Academy's annual war games were beginning. For 3 days, cadet squads would face increasingly difficult challenges. The winning squad would receive honors and fast promotion through the military ranks. More importantly, the war games were watched by military leaders from across the galaxy. It was a chance for young cadets to prove themselves worthy of command positions. Katie felt a strange excitement as she prepared for the games. For weeks she had been holding back, trying to fit in with the other cadets. Now she would finally have a chance to show what a human could really do. She didn't notice Commander Zeth Kohler watching her with growing unease. Something about her expression reminded him of the predators from his own homeworld, the ones that smiled just before they attacked. The war games were about to begin and Katie Morrison was ready to hunt. The war games began with a ceremony that filled the Academy's main arena. Flags from dozens of worlds hung from the ceiling, and military leaders from across the galaxy watched from elevated boxes. Katie stood with Squad 7, feeling smaller than ever next to her alien teammates. Commander Zeth Kohler spoke to the assembled cadets about honor, duty, and the warrior's path. His words echoed off the metal walls, but Katie wasn't really listening. She was studying the other squads, looking for weaknesses and advantages. The first day's challenge was a rescue mission. Each squad had to navigate a damaged space station, locate missing crew members, and extract them before the station exploded. Points were awarded for speed, safety, and tactical innovation. Squad 7 entered their assigned section of the training facility. The corridors were filled with smoke, debris, and the sound of failing life support systems. Emergency lights flashed red in the artificial darkness. Standard search pattern, Rylox commanded. Teams of 2 check every room systematically. Katie paused at an intersection, listening carefully. Her human hearing picked up something the others missed, a faint tapping sound coming from deeper in the station. There's someone down there, she said, pointing toward a corridor that looked completely blocked by fallen metal beams. Impossible, Rylock said. The entrance is sealed. No one could survive in there. Katie was already moving. She found a gap between the beams that looked too small for any of her squad mates. For a human who had grown up exploring caves and tight spaces, it was just another tunnel. She squeezed through and found 2 simulated survivors trapped in a room filling slowly with toxic gas. Without the sealed suits that most species required, Katie could enter the contaminated area and carry them out one at a time. Squad 7 finished the exercise first, earning maximum points. Explain your reasoning, Commander Zeth Kohler said during the debrief. I listened for sounds the others couldn't hear, and I went places the others couldn't go, Katie said simply. The commander made notes on his tablet, his expression unreadable. The second day brought urban warfare simulations. Squads had to capture and hold strategic positions in a mock city, while enemy forces tried to drive them out. The exercise was designed to test leadership, tactics, and the ability to work under pressure. Katie's squad was assigned to take a communications tower in the center of the city. The standard approach would be a direct assault, but Katie suggested something different. The tower has underground access tunnels for maintenance, she said, showing the others a schematic she had memorized. If we split into two groups, we can attack from above and below simultaneously. Rylox considered this. The tunnels are too narrow for proper military formation. They're not too narrow for me, Katie said. Against his better judgment, Rylox agreed to the plan. Katie took Fin 12 and two other small squad members through the tunnels while Rylox led the direct assault. The plan worked perfectly. While the enemy focused on Rylox's group, Katie's team captured the tower from below. They held it against 3 counterattacks using tactics that emphasized mobility and surprise over raw firepower. Other squads began to take notice. Katie Morrison, the small human from the Deathworld, was doing things that military textbooks said were impossible. The third day brought the most challenging exercise yet. Squads had to escort a VIP through hostile territory while enemy forces tried to capture or eliminate the target. The VIP was played by Fin 12, whose fragile crystal body made the exercise especially difficult. The route led through an abandoned industrial complex filled with hazards. Acid pits, unstable structures, and hidden explosive devices made every step dangerous. Katie took point, using her enhanced senses to detect traps that the others missed. Her human nose could smell chemical explosives. Her human ears could hear the subtle sounds of unstable metal. Her human eyes could spot camouflaged enemies in the shadows. They were halfway through the complex when disaster struck. An explosion brought down part of the ceiling directly on top of Fin 12. The crystal being's body cracked under the impact, and toxic industrial chemicals began leaking into the area from broken pipes. "Fall back," Rylox ordered. "The area is too dangerous." Katie looked at Fin 12, who was trying to crawl away from the expanding pool of acid. The crystal being's movements were getting weaker as the toxic fumes damaged their delicate internal structure. "We can't leave them," Katie said. "It's a simulation," Rylox replied. "Fin 12 will be marked as a casualty and extracted by the medical team." Katie knew he was right. In a real military operation, sometimes you had to abandon people to save the rest of the unit. It was a harsh truth that every soldier learned. She went in anyway. Katie ran into the contaminated zone without protective gear, her human physiology allowing her to survive in conditions that would kill most other species. She reached Fin 12 just as the crystal being's body began to shut down. "Stay with me," Katie said, lifting Fin 12 despite the awkward weight distribution. "We're getting out of here." She carried Fin 12 through the collapsing industrial complex, dodging falling debris and leaking chemicals. Her human endurance allowed her to keep moving when others would have collapsed. Her human adaptability let her find paths through obstacles that seemed impossible. They made it to safety with seconds to spare. "Medical team to training area 7, Katie called over her comm system. "We have a serious injury here." Fin 12 was rushed to the Academy's medical bay. The crystal being would recover, but it had been close. Squad 7 completed the exercise with the highest score in War Games history. Commander Zeth Kolar was waiting when they returned to the assembly area. His red eyes were brighter than usual, and his scarred face showed an expression Katie had never seen before. "Cadet Morrison," he said, his voice carrying across the silent arena, "step forward." Katie walked to the center of the floor, feeling hundreds of alien eyes watching her. She came to attention and waited. "Explain your actions during the escort mission," Commander Zeth Kolar commanded. Fin 12 was in danger. "I extracted them from the hazard zone. You were ordered to fall back." "Yes, sir." "You ignored that order." Katie hesitated. "Yes, sir." Commander Zeth Kolar walked around her in a slow circle, like a predator studying prey. "You abandoned your position. You ignored your squad leader. You put the entire mission at risk to save one individual. Fin 12 would have died. It was a simulation," Commander Zeth Kolar roared. "In real combat, your emotional weakness would have gotten your entire squad killed." The arena was completely silent. Katie could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. "This is exactly what I expected from a Deathworld primitive," Commander Zeth Kolar continued. "You cannot think rationally. You cannot follow orders. Your savage instincts make you unfit for civilized military service." Katie felt something cold settle in her chest. "Sir, the blow came without warning." Commander Zeth Kolar's armored appendage struck Katie across the face with enough force to lift her off her feet. She flew backward and hit the floor hard, blood streaming from her nose and mouth. For several seconds, The arena was completely silent except for the sound of Katie's blood hitting the metal floor. Commander Zeth Kolar stood over her fallen form. "That is what happens to soldiers who cannot follow orders," he announced to the watching cadets. "The human is too weak and too emotional for real military service." Katie slowly pushed herself up on her hands and knees. Blood dripped from her face onto the floor. She wiped her mouth with the back of her hand and looked at the red stain. Then she looked up at Commander Zeth Kolar. Her eyes had changed. Something primal and dangerous looked out from behind them. The injured, embarrassed cadet was gone. In her place was something else entirely. Katie got to her feet without saying a word. She stared at Commander Zeth Kolar for a long, silent moment. Then she turned and walked out of the arena. Commander Zeth Kolar watched her go, feeling an unfamiliar emotion creeping up his spine. For the first time in his military career, he was afraid. The timer had started. He had 20 minutes left to live. Katie Morrison disappeared into the academy like a ghost. She didn't go to the medical bay as ordered. She didn't return to her dormitory or report to any of the areas where cadets were supposed to be. Instead, she vanished into the maintenance tunnels that honeycomb the massive space station. For weeks, Katie had explored these forgotten passages during her sleepless nights. While other cadets socialized or studied, she had mapped every corridor, every service shaft, every hidden space in the academy. She knew where the security cameras had blind spots. She knew which tunnels connected to which sections. She knew how to move through the station without being detected. Now that knowledge became her weapon. Commander Zeth Kolar continued running the war games as if nothing had happened. He announced the winners, awarded the prizes, and gave his closing speech about military excellence. But his warrior's instincts were screaming that something was wrong. The way Katie had looked at him before walking away haunted him. He had seen that expression before, on the faces of the deadliest predators from his homeworld. It was the look of something that had decided to kill you and was just waiting for the right moment. "Sir, are you concerned about the human cadet?" asked his aide, a young Vorthak warrior named Kelth. "Why would I be concerned about a primitive who cannot even follow simple orders?" Commander Zeth Kolar replied, but his words sounded hollow even to himself. Dr. Vera Chen, the human xenobiologist assigned to monitor Katie's progress, tried to find her student. She checked the dormitory, the training areas, and the recreation spaces. Katie was nowhere to be found. "Have you seen Cadet Morrison?" Dr. Chen asked other members of Squad 7. "Not since the commander disciplined her," Rylock said. "Perhaps she has given up and returned to her primitive world." But Finn 12, still recovering in the medical bay, was more worried. "She saved my life," the crystal being said. "Katie would not just abandon her duties. Something is wrong." Dr. Chen began searching the academy's computer systems for any trace of Katie's location. The security cameras showed her leaving the arena, but after that, nothing. It was as if she had simply vanished. In the maintenance tunnels, Katie was transforming. The civilized mask she had worn for weeks began to fall away. Her movements became fluid and silent. Her senses sharpened to the point where she could hear conversations through solid metal walls. Every instinct that millions of years of evolution had given her activated at once. She began to study her environment differently. Instead of seeing maintenance equipment, she saw potential weapons. Instead of seeing corridors, she saw hunting grounds. Instead of seeing a space station, she saw a trap waiting to be sprung. Katie found a maintenance kit and began to work. The tools inside weren't designed as weapons, but in the right hands, anything could kill. She modified a plasma cutter, turning it from a repair tool into something far more dangerous. She fashioned improvised explosives from cleaning chemicals. She turned a simple gravity wrench into a weapon that could crush armor. The Academy's sensors detected unusual movement in the service areas, but the signals were inconsistent. The security staff assumed it was malfunctioning equipment and ignored the warnings. They had no idea that Katie was learning to move like the apex predator she truly was. Commander Zeth Kolar tried to focus on his duties, but found himself constantly checking the security feeds and looking over his shoulder. His aide Kelth noticed the strange behavior. "Sir, perhaps we should increase security patrols," Kelth suggested. "Because of one angry human?" Commander Zeth Kolar laughed, but the sound was forced. "She is probably crying somewhere about her hurt feelings." But privately, the commander began researching Katie's background more carefully. What he found disturbed him. Katie Morrison had grown up in the Australian outback. one of the most dangerous environments on Earth. She had survived encounters with venomous snakes, poisonous spiders, and predators that could kill a human with a single bite. She had learned to hunt, track, and survive in conditions that would be lethal to most galactic species. Her psychological profile showed traits that were common among elite human soldiers: exceptional situational awareness, ability to remain calm under extreme pressure, and a capacity for controlled violence that most species couldn't match. Commander Zeth Kolar closed the files and tried to convince himself that he was overreacting. Katie was just a cadet who had been disciplined for insubordination. She would accept her punishment and move on like any civilized being, but his warrior instincts knew better. In the tunnels, Katie had finished her preparations. She studied Commander Zeth Kolar's daily routine through security feeds she had learned to access. She learned his patterns, his habits, his preferred routes through the academy. The commander followed the same schedule every day. Morning briefings in his office, lunch in the officers' mess, afternoon training observations, evening reports in the War Games Control Center. Katie began positioning herself along those routes, always staying hidden but close enough to strike. She was like a spider building a web, waiting for her prey to walk into the perfect trap. Other cadets began to notice the change in atmosphere around the academy. Something felt wrong, though they couldn't put their finger on what it was. Conversations became quieter. People looked over their shoulders more often. "Where is the human?" Fin 12 asked from the medical bay. "I have not seen her since the incident." "The primitive probably went into hiding," Vex replied. "Humans are known to be emotional and unstable." But some of the older cadets, ones who had studied military history, began to remember stories about human soldiers, tales of impossible victories against overwhelming odds, accounts of human warriors who never gave up, never surrendered, and never forgot an insult. For the first time, some of them began to wonder if Earth's classification as a death world might mean more than they had realized. Commander Zeth Kolar felt the weight of those stories as he made his evening rounds. Every shadow seemed deeper. Every sound seemed louder. His natural paranoia, honed by decades of warfare, told him that he was being watched. He was right. Katie Morrison had become something that the galaxy had never seen before. A human who had been pushed beyond her breaking point and set loose in an environment she had learned to navigate better than anyone else. She moved through the maintenance tunnels like water flowing downhill, silent and inevitable. Her human endurance meant she could hunt for hours without tiring. Her human intelligence meant she could think several steps ahead of her prey, and her human capacity for patience meant she could wait for exactly the right moment to strike. Commander Zeth Kolar entered the War Games Control Center for his final report of the day. The room was filled with screens showing tactical displays and communication equipment connecting to ships across the galaxy. He didn't know that Katie Morrison was already there, waiting in the shadows like death itself. The hunt was almost over. Commander Zeth Kolar entered the War Games Control Center exactly on schedule. The room hummed with activity as technicians monitored training exercises and communications from across the galaxy. Screens showed tactical displays, ship movements, and cadet performance data. He walked to his command station at the center of the room, checking reports and preparing his final summary of the day's events. Everything seemed normal. Katie Morrison stepped out of the shadows behind him. She had been waiting in the control room for over an hour, hidden in a maintenance alcove that the security cameras couldn't see. Her human patience had allowed her to remain perfectly still while technicians worked around her. Her human hearing had let her track Commander Zeth Kolar's approach through the corridors. Now she moved with the fluid silence of a natural predator. "Commander," she said quietly. Zeth Kolar spun around, his forearms reaching for the weapons on his belt. But Katie was already inside his guard, moving with a speed that his brain couldn't process. The fight lasted exactly 12 seconds. Commander Zeth Kolar was a veteran warrior in powered armor. He had survived battles against some of the deadliest species in the galaxy. His natural strength could crush metal, and his reflexes had been enhanced by military training. None of it mattered. Katie moved like water around his attacks, using the control room's equipment as weapons and shields. When he swung his massive fists, she wasn't there. When he tried to grab her, she flowed away like smoke. She used his own momentum against him, turning his strength into a weakness. When he charged forward, she stepped aside and guided him into a bank of computer screens. When he tried to corner her, she leaped onto his back like a cat and rode his movements while striking at weak points in his armor. The modified plasma cutter she had built from maintenance tools sliced through his armor, like it was made of paper. Her improvised weapons found gaps that military designers had thought impossible to exploit. But it wasn't the tools that made Katie deadly. It was what millions of years of evolution on a death world had built into her bones. Humans had evolved as persistence hunters, chasing prey across impossible distances. They had survived by being smarter, more adaptable, and more ruthless than anything else on their planet. They had learned to kill creatures 10 times their size using nothing but intelligence, teamwork, and an absolute refusal to give up. Katie Morrison was the product of that evolution, and she was finally free to show what her species could do. Commander Zethkolar made one final attempt to fight back, raising his armored fists to crush the small human who was destroying him. Katie caught his arms and used a leverage technique that turned his own strength against his joints. The sound of breaking bone echoed through the control room. Then Katie did something that no military academy textbook had prepared anyone for. She grabbed Commander Zethkolar's head with both hands and twisted. The commander's neck broke with a sharp crack that silenced the entire control room. His body fell to the floor with a crash that shook the metal decking. His head rolled several feet away, the red glow fading from his eyes. Katie stood over the corpse, breathing normally despite having just killed one of the galaxy's most feared warriors. Blood covered her hands and face, but her expression was calm and controlled. The technicians in the control room stared at her in absolute terror. Some of them had never seen death before. Others had witnessed battles between entire fleets, but none of them had ever seen anything like what Katie Morrison had just done. Security to the War Games Control Center. One of them whispered into his communicator, "Commander Zethkolar is dead." Katie walked to the nearest chair and sat down, apparently unconcerned by the chaos around her. She wiped the blood from her face with the back of her hand and waited for security to arrive. They found her sitting calmly next to the corpse, no longer the struggling cadet, but something far more dangerous. The transformation was complete. She had become what her death world evolution had always intended her to be. The aftermath sent shockwaves through the Galactic Council. Emergency sessions were called. Military leaders demanded explanations. Some species began preparing their defenses against a potential human invasion. The Academy was shut down for investigation. Cadets from dozens of worlds were sent home while experts tried to understand what had happened. Dr. Vera Chen arrived at the holding cell where Katie was being kept. She found her student sitting peacefully on a simple cot, reading a book about galactic military history. "Are you injured?" Dr. Chen asked. "No," Katie replied without looking up from her book. "Do you understand what you've done?" Katie closed the book and met Dr. Chen's eyes. "I gave Commander Zethkolar exactly what his culture demanded. In Vorthak society, if a superior dishonors you publicly, you have the right to challenge them to single combat. If they strike you first, you have the obligation to respond with lethal force." Dr. Chen sat down across from Katie. "You killed him. He struck me in front of hundreds of witnesses. According to Vorthak military law, that was a challenge to mortal combat. I accepted his challenge and won. But you're human. Their laws don't apply to you." Katie smiled, and for a moment Dr. Chen saw something predatory in her student's eyes. "Then he shouldn't have hit me." The political implications were staggering. If one human cadet could kill a Vorthak commander so easily, what did that say about the rest of the species? Earth's death world classification was immediately upgraded from caution advised to extreme threat potential. Trade agreements were reconsidered. Military treaties were revised. Some species began lobbying for humanity to be quarantined on their homeworld permanently. The Galactic Council faced an uncomfortable truth. They had invited a species of apex predators to join their civilized community, and they had no idea what the consequences might be. A week later, Katie Morrison was quietly transferred back to Earth aboard a heavily guarded transport ship. Her military career was over, but her message had been delivered with brutal clarity. She sat in her passenger compartment, looking out at the stars through a reinforced window. The galaxy looked the same as it had when she first left Earth, but everything had changed. Other species now knew that humans weren't just another weak civilization to be patronized and controlled. They were something far more dangerous, survivors from a world so hostile that it had forged them into perfect killing machines. Katie thought about Commander Zeth Kohler's final moments. He had spent his entire career believing that military training and advanced technology were what made a warrior dangerous. He had never considered that some species were born warriors, shaped by environments so deadly that every day of survival was a victory. The transport ship jumped to hyperspace, carrying Katie Morrison back to the death world that had created her. Behind her, she left a galaxy that would never look at humanity the same way again. As Earth grew larger in the viewport, Katie allowed herself a small smile. The galaxy thought she was dangerous because she had killed one alien commander in hand-to-hand combat. They had no idea that, by human standards, she wasn't even considered particularly skilled at fighting. Katie Morrison had been an average military cadet who happened to get angry. The galaxy wasn't ready to discover what would happen when humanity decided to send their actual warriors to the stars. But someday, they would find out. Kate Morrison stood in the middle of the alien courtroom, her hands bound behind her back with energy cuffs that hummed with a strange blue light. The tall ceiling stretched high above her head, covered with symbols she couldn't read. Around her, dozens of alien beings watched from raised seats, their eyes glowing different colors in the dim light. She had been a lieutenant commander on the human ship Phoenix just 3 days ago. Now she was a prisoner wearing torn clothes and facing charges she didn't understand. The translator device in her ear buzzed with static as the alien judge spoke in a voice that sounded like grinding metal. The human known as Kate Morrison has broken the sacred trade. Laws of the Veltar Consortium, the judge announced. His body looked like it was made of blue crystal, and light flickered inside him when he talked. She has attacked our merchants and destroyed valuable property. Kate wanted to scream that it wasn't true. She had only defended herself when the alien traders tried to cheat her crew during a simple supply exchange. When they pulled weapons on her people, she fought back. That was what any human would do. But the aliens saw it differently. I was protecting my crew, Kate said, her voice echoing in the large room. Your people drew weapons first. The crystal judge made a sound like breaking glass, which the translator told her was laughter. Deathworlders always claim self-defense. Your kind cannot help but be violent. It is your nature. Kate had heard that word before. Deathworlder. That's what the aliens called humans because Earth was a dangerous planet compared to their safe, protected worlds. They thought humans were savage because they came from a place with storms, predators, and disease. They didn't understand that these things made humans strong, not evil. The Veltar prosecutor stepped forward. She was tall and thin, with forearms and skin that changed colors like oil on water. This human comes from a species that fights wars for sport. They eat the flesh of other creatures. They live on a world that tries to kill them every day. How can we trust such beings to follow our civilized laws? Kate felt anger building in her chest, but she forced herself to stay calm. Getting angry would only prove their point. My people want peace, she said. That's why I'm here. That's why we sent diplomats instead of warships. Peace, the judge repeated, and his crystal body flashed brighter. Yet within hours of arriving in our space, you assault our citizens. They were trying to sell us broken equipment, Kate explained. When we refused to pay, they threatened us. I used minimal force to protect my team. The prosecutor made a gesture with her forearms. Minimal force. She broke 3 ribs, shattered an arm bone, and gave one of our traders brain damage from hitting him so hard. Kate winced. She hadn't meant to hurt them that badly. But humans were stronger than most alien species. What felt like a gentle push to her could send them flying across a room. I didn't know my own strength would cause such damage. If you had told us how fragile your people were. Ignorance is not an excuse, the judge said, especially from a species as dangerous as yours. He turned to speak to the other aliens in the room. We have debated for days about what to do with this human. Some say we should return her to her ship and ban all humans from our space. Others say we should study her, learn about her violent nature. Kate's heart jumped. Maybe they would let her go back to the Phoenix. Captain Brown would be worried sick about her by now. She hoped her crew was safe and hadn't tried anything foolish to rescue her. However, the judge continued, and Kate's hope died. We have decided that this human will serve as an example. She will be sent to the obsidian depths where she will remain for the rest of her natural life. The words hit Kate like a punch to the stomach. Life in prison. She would never see Earth again. Never see her family. Never feel sunshine or breathe fresh air. "You can't do this," she said, but her voice came out weak and shaky. "I have diplomatic protection. My government will—" "Your government will do nothing," the prosecutor said with satisfaction. "We have already contacted your ship. They have been ordered to leave our space immediately, or we will consider it an act of war. They departed 2 hours ago." Kate felt the world spinning around her. The Phoenix was gone. Captain Brown had abandoned her. No, that wasn't right. He wouldn't have had a choice. If he stayed to fight, it would have meant war between humans and the Veltar. Hundreds of thousands of people would die. She understood why he left, but it still felt like her heart was being torn out. 2 guards stepped forward to take her away. They were huge creatures covered in thick armor, with faces hidden behind metal masks. Kate could hear them breathing through machines built into their suits. "The Obsidian Depths," the judge said as they grabbed her arms, "is a prison built inside an asteroid. It holds the most dangerous criminals in the galaxy. No one has ever escaped. The human will have plenty of time to think about the consequences of violence." As the guards dragged her toward a door at the back of the courtroom, Kate heard the prosecutor speak again. Perhaps other humans will learn from her fate. Perhaps they will understand that there is no place in civilized space for Deathworlders who cannot control their savage nature. Kate wanted to turn around and tell them that they were wrong about humans. She wanted to explain that her people were capable of great kindness and love, not just violence, but the guards were too strong, and the energy cuffs made her arms numb and useless. They pushed her through the door and down a long hallway with walls made of smooth black stone. The air smelled like metal and something else she couldn't identify. Other prisoners were being moved through the corridor, aliens of different species all wearing the same gray clothes and energy cuffs. At the end of the hall, a massive creature waited behind a desk made of the same black stone as the walls. He was easily 8 feet tall with crystal skin like the judge, but much thicker and darker. His eyes glowed red in the shadows of his face. "I am Warden Thrak," he said in a voice that made the floor vibrate. "Welcome to the Obsidian Depths, human. You will find that your reputation for violence means nothing here. In my prison, you are just another animal in a cage." Kate looked up at him and felt something cold settle in her stomach. This was really happening. She was going to spend the rest of her life in this place, surrounded by the worst criminals in the galaxy. But as the warden smiled down at her with sharp crystal teeth, Kate made a silent promise to herself. She would survive this. She would find a way out, and someday she would make them all pay for this mistake.